My name is Darryn Campbell, so thanks for coming. I'm the operations lead and one of the senior software engineers on the RhoElements side of the project. I'm based out of Basingstoke, UK, as you can probably tell by the accent, and I've been involved in the product for, since its inception really at RhoElements 1, and then I was heavily involved in the previous product, which was Pocket Browser, you may have heard mentioned on the pre-day experience. So I was involved for that 2 years as well since I joined Motorola. So the session today is adding device capabilities and some of the HTML5 add-ons to your web application. Unfortunately, the font was too big to fit all of that on the title there, so I just summarised it. So quick recap of the contents then, what we're going to go through in this presentation. So this is really aimed at those people who are maybe somewhat familiar with RhoElements 1 and looking to move their web or hybrid app to RhoElements 2. So I will just cover briefly the installation. I think most of you, if not all, would have installed RhoMobile Suite, but you may not be aware of the shared runtime or what that is, so I'll just go over that. And then go through, I've got a little example web app and just add some local storage, web SQL capabilities to it, as well as some barcode scanning using some of the device capabilities there. Go through some of the other RhoElements APIs, not just barcode scanning, and then also some cross-platform considerations. So if you want to move your app to an iPhone, you've heard a lot about the native applications over the last day, maybe day and a half, but hopefully I'll be able to concentrate more on the hybrid side. So first of all then, hopefully most of you will be familiar with this, so I won't go into too much detail, but this is just the differences between a web app, a hybrid app, and a native app. So you've had it drilled into you, what a native app is. A native app runs on the device. You would create that with the RhoStudio or your own IDE or the command line if you were that way inclined. So the example, I've just put some examples down the bottom there, would be any kind of APK on an Android device or an IPA on an iPhone. The other side of that is a web app where you don't use any of the device capabilities and you can run it in any browser you choose. So we'll be using Chrome in this demonstration, or Safari, Firefox even. So the example is Google Calendar. There's lots of other examples, just the first one that comes to my mind. And then hybrid is somewhere in the middle. So you've got your web app, but you are again using some of the barcode scanner or the imager or the card reader on the device, but you're not necessarily a full native app, an APK. You're still getting your files from a web server, be it on the device or a remote web server via HTTP. Okay, so installing. I won't labour this point because I know a lot of you have, well, all of you have already done this, but I wrote these slides before I came to the first session. So download RhoMobile Suite from Support Central. There's also links from Launchpad, which again you've had drilled into you over the last day and a half. Install it on your PC, so it's or your Mac. So it's about a 500 meg download to get all of the Ruby and it even installs Git if you want to install that as well, and RhoStudio. So that's where the size is coming from. If you're only interested in hybrid apps, or if you're not interested in the native side, then you can just go to the Start Programs Motorola RhoMobile Suite runtimes for web apps from the start line. It's also available on Mac, but I'm not sure where on the Mac because they've never given me a Mac to play with. If you go into that folder, you'll find in there a couple of cab files, one for Windows Mobile, one for Windows CE, and an APK, and those are analogous to RhoElements 1. You'll have, you install them on the device, it installs on Windows program files, RhoElements, and you configure your start page and your config XML, and you can use those in the same way you did RhoElements 1. But the advantage is now that it has a later WebKit engine, and we've done other work to additional APIs for the plugins. So, and then I've already covered the next two there. Copy the appropriate runtime, and it will behave identically to RhoElements 1 for web apps. Okay, so that's a strange sign walking around the back. The example web app then, this is a web application that was originally created by Rob Galvin, the man who's in charge of Launchpad, at our Barcelona event. Very similar to this, we had an application forum in Barcelona, and the idea of this was to just like show a getting started application, and it included barcode scanning and local storage. So he actually created a blog, one of the very first blogs on Launchpad. So if you're interested in creating a similar application yourself, you can follow his blog. But what I've done, I've taken his application and cut out the device capabilities, and then we're going to put those back in a slightly more structured way in this presentation. And I've just got a demonstration now of the web application. So I'll move out into Chrome. So like I say, because this is a web application, you can run it on the device or in your browser without any further considerations. So you have to maybe not use your imagination so much. So I want you to imagine you're at a session just like this, or an event just like this, and there's lots of different sessions going on at the same time. What I haven't done is to add the data for all of these sessions, so the data might seem a bit out of date. It's because it's all taken from our Barcelona event. So imagine, if you will, on the door, as you're coming in, there's a person there with an MC75A in my case, or it could be anything, could be an ET1 if they want to look a bit sexier. And as people come in, they want to count how many people are coming into each event. So the use case here is that you would select your session from your drop-down here. So let's say we were attending the introduction of new development, of the new development platform. I've been using this for testing yesterday, so you see there's already 6 people in the event. Let's try and find an event where there's no one in. Introduction to the MSP framework. Why would anyone want to go to that? So there's already zero people in this event. So people are coming in the door, they're trickling in, and I've got my person on the door, and they're clicking add attendee for everyone that comes in. And then I can I run to another event, a rugged RFID reader, slightly more popular, and I'll go back to the introduction to the MSP, and it's remembered that there are 5 people. So the whole purpose of showing you this is really to show you that it remembers that there's 5, and the way it's remembering that is through local storage. And I'm going to show you the very small bits of code in a minute to show how that's achieved. But what I will also show you first is this application running on my MC75A. So I have it here. I'm always scared to touch it when I do these presentations because invariably it loses active sync connection because maybe there's some hardware issue, I knock it or something. But always scared during live demonstrations. But I'm just going to run RhoElements up. And I've previously configured it, and this was working perfectly last night. I've previously configured it with the config XML pointing at my web application, which is just stored on the device. I haven't tried to be clever and put it on a server because invariably, ignore the Pocket Browser licenses reference there. That's what happens when I manage the licensing site as well. So you see this application running on the device as well, and we can click and go down to MSP framework again. And obviously, this is on my local PC, and this is on the device. So these numbers aren't going to be the same because they're not. Because they're on different devices. This is local storage. And we can, again, add attendees, and it works exactly the same as on the desktop browser. Please hold your applause till the end. Okay, so what's it done there? So local storage, if you're not familiar with local storage, the best way to think about it is a name-value pair, which is stored on the device. So you essentially, all you can do is get or set for these name-value pairs. So there's 2 ways I've used local storage in this example. The first is, if I just bring up, spoilers, if I bring up the device again. So is there a laser pointer on here? I'm scared to press anything. Oh, no, never mind. So the first is for this drop down. So there's a local storage name value pair to indicate when, to indicate which of the sessions is selected. And there's a separate name value pair for each of the sessions to indicate the number of attendees. So if I just show you this is the code which executes whenever you add an attendee, whenever you press the add attendee button. So get item, so SID is the combo box, drop down the currently selected item, and then get item for RE dash is, so all the keys, the names of the count of attendees in each session are just RE dash and then the session ID. So it gets it, does some error checking and adds 1 to it, and then outputs it on the screen. So I'll just, in fact, it might be a bit more impressive if I show you this running in Chrome. So you can actually see these local storages if you press Control-Shift-J, or I'm sure there's a better way to do it. I think you can use this spanner icon up here. Developer tools, and then it's developer tools. So, I mean, I'm probably teaching your grandmother to suck eggs here. I'm sure everyone's seen this console before. This is very similar to the Firebug console in Firefox. And you see under local files here, you'll see, I mean, a lot of this is my test data, but all of the sessions on the left-hand side there, session ID, which is this row here, so currently selected 5. So. And that's that. And then this is an accompanying screenshot, which is just an earlier version of the test data. Okay, so that was pretty much non-interesting from a point of view of, okay, so the people are coming in, we're pressing add attendee, and then at the end of the day, what are we going to do? Well, we're just going to walk up to some survey person and go through each of them individually and say, oh, there were 5 people in that session, there's 6 people in that session. It's pretty much something you could have done with a bit of pen and paper and just ticking down people as they arrive. It's not very personal, but now I'm going to describe a better implementation, which helpfully involves scanning barcodes. So if you look at your badges, everyone's got a little barcode on the badge. I don't know what's in that barcode, but I wasn't invited to this APAC developer conference, but they had a QR code on their name badge. So the idea there was you could go around and you meet someone, and rather than say, can I have your business card, and you don't have them on you for whatever reason, which happened to me numerous times the other day, you can just say, scan my badge, and you have the rather awkward, let me just get down here and scan your badge with my phone. And we had a similar thing at the European, so the EMEA conference in Barcelona. So this is one I was invited to. So this is my card from Barcelona, and you could scan it, and that contains your name and your organization, and probably a couple of other things as well that I've forgotten. So now this implementation we're going to create now will, rather than someone come in and you press add attendee, someone comes in and you say, let me scan your badge, which in this somewhat arbitrary world is a far superior implementation. And then that will increment the counter and will display their name on the screen as well as their organization. So you can scan their badge and say, hello, Darryn Campbell from Motorola Solutions. Welcome to the presentation. So if we wanted to, we wouldn't even need to have the name on the badge. So you wouldn't have to call it a name badge anymore. It's got a barcode badge. So let me so what I'm going to do is live demonstration time. I have cheated somewhat in that I've completely annotated all of my code. So I'm going to make the changes live. So this is the add attendee button. I'm just going to take this off of the page. And then I'm going to add a field which will receive the name and organization after scanning. And then display, okay, that's fine. Yep, okay, so that's all the changes I need to make, and I will talk about these changes in a bit better detail in the coming slides. And then copy that file to my device. And then hit refresh because it's just running off of the local file system, and it immediately refreshes, and you'll see at the moment it doesn't display anything because it will only enable the scanner after I select something out of the drop-down. So I enable wireless LAN infrastructure, and it says ready to scan. And the moment of truth, so I've come into the room, I've got my card, everything stays connected. Aha, yes, excellent. So it's come up, oh, Campbell Darryn. Well, that's just, I'm sure you could code around that. Campbell Darryn Motorola, excellent. So I've got some additional. So on my desk at work back in the UK, there is a set of printed out cards as well, which I somewhat sillily forgot to bring with me. So you'll recognize some of those names here from other people who didn't quite make it here today because they weren't invited. But Adam Blum, you've seen him. He's the former CEO of RhoMobile, so he'll come in and we'll say, these are around the right way, because I actually created these barcodes myself. Hello. Ben Kennedy, you may have seen Ben on Launchpad. There we go, Ben Kennedy, MSI, and James Morley-Smith. We've all seen a lot of him. He's had about 3 or 4 introductions at the various sessions. Why is this not scanning? Must be a problem with my PC. I can't imagine there possibly being a problem with the device. Let's scan someone else. Well, you can imagine how this works. Oh, now it's getting frustrating now. Scan the barcode. All right. There we go. Davide Scambari. So he's, you may see him on Launchpad as well. He works with me. In fact, he sits behind me in the UK, and he concentrates mainly on our Android port. So there's a demonstration of our new amazing barcode implementation. So if I get back to the attendee, so we've added some scanning. So I'm going to presume that a lot of you in this room are familiar with doing something simple like just adding basic scanning to the web page. So bear with me because I do want to make this absolutely clear for those who are not fully aware of it. So whenever we selected the drop-down, or it may have even been on page load, we execute this function, enable scanner. And what we're doing here is 2 separate things, and you saw Rob Galvin do this if you attended his session yesterday in Ruby, but we're doing this in JavaScript. So pre-existing on the page, you don't have to do anything else, is a JavaScript scanner object. And there's a number of methods and properties that scanner has, and they're all in the documentation, and I'll show you that in a little while. But we're doing 2 things here. We're setting up a JavaScript event to receive the scanned data, and we're then enabling the scanner. So enabling the scanner is putting it in a state where we're able to press the yellow trigger and it will do a scan. It won't, if you want to make it scan without having to press the yellow trigger, you can do what's called a soft scan, but we're just enabling the default functionality here. And the decode event, so think of this as a callback that you receive from the scanner, is receiving a JSON parameter, and I've defined it down here. So it receives the JSON parameter and it just calls another function with the data associated with the scan. So there's about 4 or 5 different parameters that come back in that callback. One of which is obviously the barcode data. You're also given the time that it was scanned that we're going to use shortly, the symbology that was scanned. So these are QR codes, but you might be scanning a code 128, a code 39, a 3 of 9. And that's all the lines you have to do in order to enable the scanner. In fact, you don't even have to have this top line. If you don't specify a callback, then it'll output the data in what we call wedge mode, which just sends characters to the screen as key presses. So similar to data wedge if you've used that. Okay, so this is the function that was called in our callback. Just for completeness, So on add-attendee was exactly the same code as we used in our original web app. This is the local storage, adding it to RE dash and then the session ID. Get vcard info is a function that I can't claim that I wrote. Rob Galvin wrote it, and that parses out this QR code on the badge and returns whatever you've asked for. So FN is the full name, not function, and org is the organization. So that's why it was coming out with Darryn Campbell : Motorola or MSI. And then there's just some HTML there to add the information to the screen. Incidentally, the full code of this will be posted. I'll do a blog on Launchpad so that you can follow it if maybe that's not too familiar from the slide, too recognizable from the slide, or I go too fast or too slow. So that was very useful. The previous example, it enabled us to say hello and then whoever we are. I think it's Davide still on the screen. Hello Davide, hello Darren. But what it would be useful to do is to store in some kind of web SQL database on the device as the people come in, and then you've actually got a history of when they arrived, if they were late, and if you wanted to, you could upload this to a server at some other point. So rather than have to take your device physically to some kind of muster point, it would just all happen automatically. I don't know, via Ajax or something. So this is where we're going to get to. So I'm just, again, going to go into, spoilers, I'm just going to go into the code and add those bits of code. So DCC is my initials, incidentally, if you wonder why I'm searching for that. So, scan. Okay, so we're still going to have the scan output, which is ready to scan. And so rather than display the scan data, which is hello, welcome to the conference, then we are going to insert that scan data into a web page, into a web SQL database. And this function here, load data, will, I'm not sure, where are we? Session change. So this, okay, so whenever we change the session in the combo dropdown, then we'll also reload the people who are in that session. So I think that was the only two changes I had to make, yes. So I'll just copy those over again. Yes, and refresh. It's always awkward. I never know how much coding to do versus seeing the full result. It's boring if you're just watching me code, but then maybe it feels like I'm cheating a bit if I'm just editing, deleting previously written code or commenting it out. Anyway, so this is the new, with the new logic, which adds people to the web SQL database. So I've deleted all of my databases off the device, so there's no one in any of the sessions at the moment. And well, let's try scanning some barcodes. So I'm in there because well, I didn't actually go to this one in Barcelona, but we'll pretend I did. So I scan, and it says name, company, and time in, and then we get some more people join. Oh, these are these barcodes that scan. Let's make them a little bit bigger, then they're more likely to scan. So we've got, you can't even see what's going on. Okay, we've got Adam in there. We've got Ben again, and then I'll just, and I'll just move this over here. Probably a bit superfluous scanning 4, but we'll pretend that it's useful. Okay, so you see here, the things to note probably are, I'll get this over here so I can point at it. So they're ordered by the time, so descending the way they came in, and I'll show you the code for that in a minute. And it's persistent, it's on the device. So let me change this to a different session. So there's no one in this session at the moment. I won't scan a load more people, but if we go back, we'll see because of the load DB function that I uncommented, it's loaded our attendees from the web SQL database on the device. So this is a really good way of storing application state, for example. Let me just take you through the code, and then I'll take you through why you might want to do this. So the code then we're just going to be writing some web SQL. So if you attended the session yesterday on RhoConnect, that's obviously only applicable for native applications. It requires more setup, and it is a lot more powerful, obviously, because it's doing all the syncing for you automatically. So the purpose of me telling you about this is to really let you know the full capabilities of the product and just what's available in HTML5. So this is the table creation down here. So if you're familiar with SQL syntax, it's exactly the same. We're calling this on page load, so it initializes the database, which just creates it physically on the device. Maximum size of 5 megabytes, excuse me, which is the industry standard in WebKit implementations. And you can modify the maximum size in our config file should you wish. And this is common syntax for all of the web SQL interfaces. The fact that you create, so you create the transaction and you say function tx, and then it's an anonymous JavaScript function that you give your SQL. And then you give it a function to execute on success, which in this case does nothing, and a function to execute if there's some kind of error. And I'll come to that presently, but I'll just take you through the rest of the examples. So this is if we insert data into our database. This is when we scanned the barcode, this function gets called. So the syntax again is the same as SQL. Insert into this is the table name incidentally, and then these are populated with the actual scan data. Like I said, part of the callback was the time it was scanned, so that would be the time on the device, which luckily no one pointed out was completely wrong. It wasn't Chicago time at all. It's certainly not 4 o'clock. We're not all going home yet. And then this fn db load data will do the select out of the database. So you're familiar with this, but if you've done any SQL, and then it's ordering by scan time descending, which made the order put the most recent one at the top. And I've taken a lot of the code out here, but if you're familiar with any kind of retrieving data from a database in code, then you're familiar with record sets, and you go through the record set for the length of it and output the stuff to HTML. I probably don't need to talk that through in the presentation, but like I say, this will be available on Launchpad. I'm not sure when I'm back in the UK, and I leave tonight, but it will be there soon. Okay, so a bit of a side note then on logging and debugging. So first of all, it's probably best if I show you this in the code. If I remember, what was the function called? ReLog. db.js. Okay, so here I have 2 functions which are essentially doing the same thing. So you remember, if I make that a little bit bigger, I don't know how to make it bigger. View, zoom in. Sorry about this, very unprofessional. There we go. Okay, so we've got 2 functions here which are essentially doing the same thing. So onError, if you remember, was the error function that we provide every time we do a web SQL transaction. And ReLog is just a log function which we can call from within our code to say, I am here, or retrieving value from database. And what is, I can't claim I did this. What Rob has done quite cleverly, he has a variable which is RhoElements, and that enables his function to be a bit cleverer about knowing whether it's whether it's running in Chrome or Safari, or whether it's running on the device. So all he's done for the RhoElements, he's just done a regular expression find on the current user agent, which will return Motorola WebKit if we're running on the device in RhoElements, or it will return something else if we're not. So just an example here of using the pre-existing JavaScript function generic to log, and you can configure that to log to either a file on the device or to an HTTP location, you can send them as HTTP posts. And as long as you've got something listening for HTTP posts at the other end, and we've got an example app, then you can do it that way. It's a lot easier than copying the log file off the device and plopping it on your desktop and then searching through. And then console.log, log to the browser console, that comes out, if you're not familiar with it, comes out in this Chrome window under console. See, there's two things here. It's just complaining that it can't create the tables, and the reason for that is because it's already created them. I just didn't do a load of logic to test whether they existed or not. There are only warnings anyway. And the logs would come out there if anything else went wrong. Okay, so if you're not familiar, I'm presuming a lot of the people in this room will be familiar with this, but just bear with me whilst I describe it. There's the debug console in Chrome, or like I say, or Firebug or Safari has the same as the Chrome. It's actually part of WebKit rather than something that Google have made as the Chromium interface. If you go to scripts, then you're able to see all of your JavaScript on the device. So, for example, if on refresh, I wanted to add a breakpoint in there, and then when I hit refresh, you'll see breakpoints hit, and I can look at the state of variables. Is RhoElements? Oh yeah, okay, so is RhoElements is false because, it's not running in RhoElements. Yeah, so incidentally, that is RhoElements. This is the navigator. This is using, regular expressions to find Motorola WebKit and setting the global variable is RhoElements. So that gives you a rather nice debug interface in JavaScript. I'd encourage you to play with that if you haven't played with it already. I believe the same is offered for the Rho simulator as well, I believe, but don't quote me on that. Okay, so if you look at the original title or the original brief I was given for this presentation, I also was asked to mention application caching, and so I shall do that now. Application caching is a really powerful thing. So the use case is, imagine I'm a worker on the fringe, and every now and then I get connection, I lose connection, I get connection. So it's a way of making our devices work in an offline mode or a semi-connected mode. So the idea here is you've got your web application or your hybrid application on a server somewhere that we can only connect to periodically. The first time we connect to that server, there's something called a manifest file as part of the application. And we've defined this attribute in our app. It's just an HTML attribute, and it says where the manifest is. WebKit will, behind the scenes, using its power, go ahead and fetch that manifest file. And that manifest file will be a list of all of the files required by your application. This is something that you write, so you have to manually maintain it. And it reads all those files and it says, okay, that's my application. And it downloads that from the server. Obviously, we have connection at this point. And so I'm walking around. I can't walk around with this because it's active sync, but I'm walking around with my device, and then I'm out of range. And then all of a sudden, my application, rather than giving me a bad link or give some other kind of timeout, it will just use the files which have been cached on the device that I listed in my manifest. So the user doesn't notice whether they've gone in range or out of range or not. As far as they're concerned, it's a seamless experience. They're carrying on, they're scanning their barcodes on their, whatever their job is in their warehouse. And when they come back into range is when you, as the application developer, have to be a bit more clever. So here's an example then of when WebSQL would be useful. So in that situation where I've lost connection and I've started scanning barcodes. Well, previously, imagine what I was doing was uploading them to a server. I can't do that anymore. I've lost connection. So if you keep an eye on whether you're connected or disconnected, and we have an API for that, then instead of uploading them, you could save them into a WebSQL database, or you could put whatever data you want in that database associated with the scan. And then when you regain connection, you can go and do a select on the database and then upload it with whatever technique you were previously uploading it when you had connection. So this is a talk-through example because I didn't want to start setting up a network and having everything go wrong there. But that's an example of a That's an example of a manifest file, a very small one. There's only 3 files in there. You'd also have all your images or any resources in your application. The only change to the application, it doesn't have to be called .manf, but this is essentially just pointing at this manifest file. And as soon as that's parsed by WebKit, as soon as this tag here is parsed by WebKit, it'll go off and do the needful downloading all of those files. And there's more information about this online on the HTML5 Doctor. This wasn't actually originally my slide, so I take it that that's a very good website to go to. Okay, so how are we doing on time? Excellent. Okay, so other RhoElements APIs. So you've seen scanning. You've probably seen scanning to death because that's what we always use as the example. It's what I know Rob was using yesterday in his presentation. And whenever you talk to anyone at Motorola, they'll always pull out scanning because we call it our bread and butter on the team. Because that's what it is. That's why we're here, because we're selling scanners and software now. But yeah, so this is. I just wanted to walk you through the online documentation. So obviously you could look at this yourself, but I did want to sort of talk through very briefly. So the link for this is docs.rhomobile.com at the moment. Eventually we may be. Why is it going to Edge Docs? Eventually we may be bringing this into the Launchpad fold, but certainly in the short to medium term, this is what you should be using as your primary resource. So anyone familiar with RhoElements 1 will be hopefully familiar with the compiled HTML help file that was installed as part of the installation. Now that no longer exists in RhoElements 2. All of our documentation is online, a decision we've taken for a number of reasons, one of which was because I've been asking to put it all online for years. It was a bit of a miss that we didn't have it online because we find an error. This has happened to me. We find an error in the documentation and we have to wait for the next release for it to actually be fixed. That was really poor. But now, so if you look down the left-hand side here, these are all of the APIs available. So API list is just an alphabetized list of everything. And if I go through down here, you'll see like battery, we'll cover briefly shortly, which shows a battery indicator. And these are, this is the entire set of APIs that were available in RhoElements 1, plus the set that have now been brought into the fold by the Rhodes acquisition. So you'll see camera, which has come from the Rhodes stable, NFC, all of these have come from the Rhodes stable, and, well, obviously, Rogue controller. So that's an alphabetized list, but if you don't want to use the alphabetized list, if you're not sure what you're looking for or what they're called, then Rob, I can't claim that I've done this, Rob has also grouped them again. So to use our favorite scanner as an example, barcode, and you see, oh no, not barcode, that wasn't scanner, it was barcode. Let's go back down to scanner. I'll come to barcode shortly. I do want to pick that out as a special mention. So scanner again, very familiar to anyone. I'll stand here in this white space. Anyone who's seen RhoElements 1, so the syntax, you can either use meta tags to access the existing scanner object. You can use JavaScript, which is what we've been using in our examples. Do I have it down? But now in RhoElements 2, you can also use the Ruby syntax. So this is the syntax that you saw Rob using yesterday. And if you've got any questions about the differences between JavaScript and Ruby, then you can refer to this top section. The most important difference is Ruby uses a capital letter. That's how it has to have a capital letter at the start of its modules. Whereas JavaScript for backwards compatibility really is the reason it's particularly different. It uses a small s up there, so that's one difference. Another difference is Ruby doesn't have brackets after its method name, so enumerate up there doesn't have any. And so this is common for all of the APIs which have come out of the RhoElements stable. Again, you may have seen this in RhoElements 1. Methods are listed up the top. They don't have any properties associated with them. Certainly, there's no parameters. And parameters are name value pairs, you can think of them. So enabled, and then you specify the scanner that gets enabled. So you might have more than one scanner on your device, scan 1, scan 2. This is how you enable the non-default scanner. And then there are a lot of properties associated with the scanner. I was saying yesterday it took me all day to write this, and this isn't even the decoder properties. Okay, so at the bottom then, the events associated with each of these APIs. The decode event here, you've seen we've used decode event, the data and the time. And Bluetooth scanners have a separate event to say whether they're connected or not. Incidentally, this isn't the CS3070. That's a separate API. That's just through Bluetooth. Where this is talking about the Bluetooth RS507 scanners, the ring scanners that you have associated with a number of our MPA2 platforms. And then there'll be some general remarks at the bottom of each of these pages. And some examples, yes, of course, examples. We are in the process of rewriting a lot of our examples. It's probably do the product, get it working was top of the priority, and then slightly below top priority was actually get some Ruby examples in there. So you'll see all of these are the RE1 examples, and we're currently working on some Ruby examples for the RhoElements APIs. So if I can remember where I was going with the presentation. So, okay, right, now we're going to add a battery icon to our application. So just to walk through how we would do this, let's just find the battery API. I can see it in the alphabetized list. Let's try and be clever and see if I can find it in user interface. It is. Here it is, battery. So all we want to do, oh no, oh yes, it worked. Okay, all we want to do is to show the battery and move it to a different location. So I'm going to be using the JavaScript. I'm going to be using the JavaScript for this because, well, one, I've got a hybrid application, so I don't have any Ruby in my app. But if I have got a native application, I might want to do this in my view because I don't consider this part of my core business logic, or I just want to do it on a specific page. There's any number of reasons, and you might just want to do it in JavaScript. So if I go down, so we don't want to use that method because that's for some smart batteries, but we've only got a dumb battery in this terminal. So all we want to do is to make it visible and to set some of the, well, let's just show you. That would be easier, I think. So, oh my gosh, it's so big. DCC. So here we are, DCC4. This is the last time I'm going to be doing this. So if is RhoElements show battery, and I'll show you the code for show battery on the next slide, I think it is. Let me just copy that over to the device. Okay, so let's refresh. Now let's just, here we go. Okay, so, I've lost a power bar. Okay, so this is the battery icon. You may have seen it sort of rotating. It looked quite cool, actually. It's not supposed to do that. It was just doing that because it was executing the JavaScript on the following slide. So, this was the demonstration. Yeah, I went all out here and I actually downloaded the skin, but then it ended up being quite small, so I didn't like doing that for the rest of the screenshots. Okay, so this was the show battery function in JavaScript. So all it does is set a number of properties. I went through to great extremes to find this. This is the hex code of the color that's used in the application. I can probably show you the application side by side. There's not really much to say about this, really. This is a string, obviously, and this is a number. So these go on the right-hand side of the properties. And up just makes it point upwards. And so all of those properties were self-evident in my opinion, and you've got those from the help documentation. Okay, so I did want to briefly talk about how you could bridge the gap between native and hybrid. So unfortunately, I couldn't get to the beginning of Jeff Paremba's talk yesterday, but I thought I'd cover it in this talk as well. This isn't an in-depth how to access web apps from native apps. This is just a one slide in passing, chuck some knowledge at you. Native apps are run on a web server on the device, so you have all of your Ruby code in your web server, and your view is over here being rendered in the Motorola WebKit, and they're communicating in a client-server relationship. You can think of it that way. Certainly for the view to controller communication, it's client-server. So this is, so imagine we had the scanner example, and this is very similar to Rob's example that he had in his presentation yesterday. So he enables the scanner. This is in Ruby. It's our Ruby controller in our native application, enabling the scanner with all decoders here. And this is the way we configure the scanner for, this is the way we configure the scanner callback, the decode event, if you will. Here it is, for Ruby. So we just give it another Ruby function down here. You see capital S for scanner, like I mentioned earlier. Decode event is the event name. And the actual scanner callback is defined here. Rather than receiving all of the properties as a JSON function, they're now returned in true Ruby fashion as a Ruby hash in this app_param structure. So we can now access the data and time from that hash. The interesting part of this code, well, the more interesting part, because obviously it's all very interesting, the WebView execute.js. So WebView exists as an object in the native application as something you can use to interface with your HTML page. And you can say .navigate, I believe. If you look at the documentation, all of the APIs are there. And you can also say execute.js, so, which is JavaScript, obviously. So there's a display message function in our view that is taking this data, and it will, well, presumably display the message. I haven't actually gone to the trouble of listing that here. But what about if we want to go the other way? So in our view, in our client that's not on the server, we have a JavaScript function, enable scanner. Now, we don't call scanner.enable. We want to tell our native application, enable the scanner. So the way we do that is to use this Ajax call here, $get, and the native application is called scanning example in the app directory in the hierarchy that if you've been to any of the presentations yesterday you would have seen. And enable the scanner, just for completeness from the previous slide, I use the same name here, def enable the scanner. And it doesn't take any parameters, and that, in a nutshell, is how you go from the client to the server. I had someone asking me yesterday, well, isn't this going to get confusing if I enable the scanner in my JavaScript and then I do some Ruby here and I call out to JavaScript and then that calls back into Ruby? And he was saying this would get really confusing, and I would say yes, well that is a very confusing way to do it, and you wouldn't want to do it that way. This isn't a regular use case to be calling between the two. If you've done a native application, then you're going to be writing your business logic in the controller. You're not going to be writing business logic in the view. This is an exception rather than a rule. Okay, so that finishes that portion of the presentation. Okay, right, so cross-platform consideration. So again, this is something I wanted to mention briefly. So you've heard from marketing, from Mark, from everyone, and I'll say it as well. This is really write once, run anywhere, the software, what you're doing here with Rho Mobile Suite. But you have to have some basic common sense considerations here. So iPhones don't have laser barcode scanners. So you can't say to an iPhone application, enable, what's an obscure symbology? Can postal, sorry if there's anyone that uses can postal in here, but it's not one of the major symbologies we use. So if you have your application that says to an iPhone to enable it, the iPhone's just going to go, bleh, I don't understand that. Similarly, the MC75 here doesn't have NFC, so you're going to need to be a bit clever how you write your applications if you're going to be porting to a number of different devices. So primary resource for this information here is this online compatibility guide, and probably easiest, oh, I thought I had a link on here. If I pull it up in my browser. So this is constantly being maintained. So here you are up the top here. We have the various different platforms. So you could consider these are the RhoElements 1 applications, and these are the applications that have been brought into the fold, platforms that have been brought into the fold by the combined product. Not all of the APIs are available on all of the platforms. And the example I'm going to cover now is scanning. So scanning is RS, begins with an S. So scanning, in terms of scanner.enable and scanner.decode event, is only available in the first, well, it'd be useful if we had I'm not going to say a frame because I don't like frames, but it'd be something up there. On the ET1 and the Motorola, the CE, Windows mobile devices here. But you say to me, Darren, I want to have barcode scanning on my iPhone as well. And I say, yes, well, you can because you write once and you run anywhere. But you're not going to be able to use the scanner on the iPhone yet in 2.0. What you will want to do, one of two things, probably what I would do, I would have is-moto device. There's a couple of ways to do that. In hybrid, there's the generic .oem info, and in native, there's another way of determining if it's a moto device. Can't remember it off the top of my head. That's one way. And if it is moto, you could use the scanner. If it's not Motorola, you could use the barcode. Barcode, here we are. So you see barcode is supported on every single one of the devices. This is something that's come out of the Rhodes stable. And so it's very cross-platform. But because it's so generic, if I just click on the help for it here, you'll notice it's not quite as functional. So whereas before, do you remember that enormous list of parameters that I said took me all day to write? Well, now we just have take barcode, which will show the camera on the iPhone. It will bring up the camera and you can scan the barcode like that, and it will send it to your controller. And I believe there's a way to specify which decoders. I can't see it here. But regardless, I mean, this is the completeness of the help file. So if you just wanted something simple, just to take any barcode, maybe it's primarily a consumer app, for example, then you could use this barcode API. Otherwise, I would suggest that you use the is-moto device and then the scanner for Motorola devices and the barcode for the iPhone and the BlackBerry. Okay, and finally then, oh, that's good timing, wasn't it? And finally, well, Rob asked me to put a slide in for best practice advice. So, like I say, I've been on the product now since the inception of RhoElements 1, which was released, I can't remember the date, but it was released in 2001. So we've actually had our WebKit port out there for a number of years. Sorry, not for a number of years, for a number of months. Oh, sorry, I was just so excited. So we've had customers using the Motorola WebKit, and I've been involved on the product since Pocket Browser. So I've seen customers using it with Internet Explorer, which is what we previously used to use in Pocket Browser, and just constantly complaining that the rendering was poor. So we fixed that, and now what's happening is customers, mentioning no names, are loading enormous DOM structures into the application. Now, it's WebKit. It's fast. It's HTML5 on Windows Mobile, which we've not seen before in an enterprise environment. But these are still, this is not an ET1. The ET1, for example, has a 1 gigahertz processor, whereas the ES400 has a 600 megahertz processor, for example. you're not going to get exactly the same performance from those two devices because they're not the same. So just a couple of things here to really try and avoid enormous DOM structures in the device. Just use Ajax. Just get the bits of the pages in as you need them. Avoid using frames. This is it's not 100% necessary, but I'm a web developer as well as everything else. I try and avoid using frames. I think it's bad practice. And if you get a callback from the scanner, for example, that's going to come to your top-level frame. So you're going to have to write some kind of logic to route that to the appropriate frame. To be honest, it's a heck of a lot simpler, without wishing to use naughty words, to just use like a div tags or some other kind of layout to create your application a little bit nicer. And the other thing, you've heard a lot about jQuery mobile and Censure and how you can use these frameworks to make your app look like what was the example yesterday? Look like an iPad on an ET1. Well, that's great. But what we're not going to be able to do is have an iPad on an MC2180. That's like one of our low-end value tier devices, quite popular in India at the moment. I think it's selling really well, but it's a low-end device. You're not going to be able to run beefy frameworks on those low-end devices. So just give some considerations into some of those points. Thank you.